سيدي يا حبيبي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا رحمة للعالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh to Maulana and to all the participants.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome to tonight's session, and as usual, without any further delay, I'm going to hand over to Maulana inshallah to continue. Shukran Imam.
Jazakallah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fih. Huwa al-awwal wal-akhir wal-zahir wal-batin wa huwa bi kulli shay'in alim. Amma ba'd, fa a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wa bashiris sabirin. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Sallallahu ala nabiyyil ummi wa alihi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Salatu wa salamun alayka ya Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Respected viewers and listeners, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All praises due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our cherisher and our sustainer, and choices of durood and salam be upon his beloved, our master, arwahna fida Sayyidina Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, today we will be discussing the topic of selflessness that was demonstrated during the Battle of UHUD. And this is something that with each passing day, we find that the Muslims and the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam are forgetting and leaving this very critical aspect of one's character. And we see us degenerating day by day when it comes to the aspect of selflessness. And it is important that we look at our history and the history of Islam and understand, what does selflessness mean? What does selflessness look like? So that we can implement that in our lives. And we find this in many of the battles that took place during the history of Islam, but especially during the Battle of Uhud, seeing that this battle took place on the 15th of SHAWAL, the month which we are currently in. It is important for us to understand from this battle specifically what was those events that took place that demonstrate to us what should our conduct be when it comes to sacrificing and expressing selflessness when it comes to others and when it comes to Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of the entire battle itself. I'm just going to choose a few incidents that took place for us to understand the concept of selflessness that was portrayed and demonstrated during this battle. Now, one of the first incidences was with regard to Hazrat Ziyad bin Sakan, radiyallahu ta'ala an. Now, he was that Sahabi that when the kuffar had surrounded Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. Now, just to basically put you into the picture, we all know that initially the Muslims were victorious in this battle and the kuffar were driven out. But because the archers that were placed by Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam on one of the hillsides near the Mount Uhud, they left before they got the instruction from Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, then the entire picture of the battle had changed and the kuffar attacked again, and they had attacked the Muslims from behind and from the front, and eventually the Muslims were surrounded by the kuffar. And during this time, at one point, the kuffar had surrounded Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, and they were coming to assault him. And Huzur alayhi salam then called out and he asked, who is prepared to sacrifice their life for me? And as soon as Hazrat Ziyad bin Sakan radiyallahu ta'ala an heard this, he took 5 other Ansaris and immediately went and he started surrounding Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam and defending Huzur alayhi salam. And while defending Huzur alayhi salam, he got injured so badly that eventually he was about to become shaheed. He fell onto the floor and he could barely move. And during this time, then Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam called and asked for his body to be brought before him. And when Hazrat Ziyad bin Sakan heard this, then he had a few breaths left in him and he dragged himself to Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam and he placed his head onto the blessed feet of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam and he became shaheed. this is, firstly, we can see the jazba, the enthusiasm that the Sahaba Ikram had to sacrifice everything for the sake of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. There was no, self-centeredness. Everything was about Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. And this is something we need to learn. They were not interested in recognition. They were not interested in respect. They were not interested in getting accolades and praise. All they were interested in was dying for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. And this is why they were rewarded the way they were rewarded. I mean, in this case, if you look at Hazrat Ziyad bin Sakan radiyallahu ta'ala, and due to his self-sacrifice, look at the shahadat that he received, that he got to place his head on the blessed feet of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, and in this state he breathed his last. Subhanallah. So this is one example of the selflessness that the Sahaba Ikram had demonstrated during the Battle of Uhud. Then there was another Sahabi who was busy, while the fighting was continuing in the battle, he was busy eating dates. And he was really not concerned about what was happening in the battle. And while he was eating his dates, he asks, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, if I have to die in the state right now, if I have to go into this battle and die, what would my end be? And Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam replied that undoubtedly you would enter Jannah. When he heard this, then immediately he left his dates and he hastened into the battlefield and he started fighting the kuffar, the mushriks, and he killed a few of them before he himself became shaheed. Again, we can see how they did not worry about whether they will get injured, whether they will lose their lives, or what will happen to their families. All of that was not a concern. What was a concern to them was to sacrifice their lives and everything for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. This was their primary objective in life. And this is something that we need to re-inculcate in ourselves. We, as the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, we have forgotten about what is selflessness and what is the meaning of sacrifice. Everything is about us. Everything is about me. Everything is about I. And we need to remove that understanding from our minds. We need to go back to the teachings of the Sahaba Ikram of what it means to sacrifice, what it means to be selfless when it comes to Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. I mean, some people have told me, I've done so much for this family and they don't show me respect, they don't give me any recognition. And, you get these kind of comments. And immediately from this, you can understand that our mindset is such that when we do something, we don't do it for the pleasure of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. We do it because we want recognition, we want praise, we want people to respect us because of what we are doing. And if this is our mindset, then we have moved away from the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. We have moved away from the demonstration of the teachings of Huzur Islam by the Sahaba Ikram, because this was not their mindset. Their mindset was that they were not interested in anything. No reward, no recognition, no respect, nothing. All they were interested in was to sacrifice only for the pleasure of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. And this is what we need to remind ourselves of. Now, eventually, when the kuffar had surrounded Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam and the Muslims, at one point there was one kafir from the Quraysh tribe. His name was Ibn Qamiyya. And he saw an opportunity while the Muslims were scattered. He saw an opportunity to attack Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam with the intention of ma'azallah killing Huzur alayhi salam. And he came rushing towards Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, and he attacked him and he hit him on his face so hard that Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam became severely injured. And another kafir then also attacked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam on his face, and eventually two of his Mubarak teeth became shaheed, and his lower lip also became injured, and he started to bleed profusely. And during this time, Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, he was now surrounded by the kuffar, and all of these people, they were trying to attack him directly, trying to ma'azallah kill him directly. And during this time, there was when another kafir, his name was Ubay bin Khalaf, when he saw Ibn Qamiyya and this other kafir attacking, he also came riding on his horse towards Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, also with the intention of attacking and trying to kill Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And Huzur alayhi salam, when he saw this Ubay bin Khalaf coming towards him, he immediately took a spear from one of the other Sahaba Ikram and he threw it towards Ubay bin Khalaf. And this incident, just to show us the shan of the knowledge of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam, just as a side. And when Ubay bin Khalaf, when the spear hit him, it just literally grazed his neck, and he then turned away and he ran away. But when he went back to the camp of the kuffar, he kept asking them, is my injury serious? Is my injury serious? And they had already told him that no, it's just a superficial wound. There's nothing to worry about. But he kept asking them, is the injury serious? And they asked him, we've already told you that this injury is superficial. Why do you keep asking us the same thing? And this Ubay bin Khalaf, look at how much of certainty and faith he had, even being a kafir. This is the level of certainty he had in the words of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam. And this is something that we as Muslims need to understand. Ubay bin Khalaf then says to them, it's fine even if it's a superficial wound, but the reason I'm so concerned is that some time back, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he once told me that he will kill me. So though this might be a minor injury, I believe that even if he had to spit on me, I'd interpret that to be a short death. So this was how certain he was that some time back, a long time back, Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam had said to Ubay bin Khalaf that he would kill him. And now when he received the superficial wound from Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam, he reminded himself of what Huzur had mentioned to him, and this was what was worrying him. And eventually, obviously, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had mentioned that he will kill him, it has to come to pass. And he eventually, even though it was just a superficial wound, but he eventually died due to that same injury that Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam had incurred on him. And this can show us the shan of the knowledge of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam, that he already knew way back that during this battle, this is what is going to happen, and he is going to be the one that is going to kill Ubay bin Khalaf. So this was just to make us understand, while the kuffar had surrounded Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam, some of the things that was taking place and some of the incidents that make us understand and demonstrate the shan of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam. Now in the state, while Huzur alayhi salam was injured and he was surrounded from all directions, the kuffar then started to shoot arrows towards Huzur alayhi salam. Now imagine our beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in the center. He is surrounded by the kuffar, and from all directions they are now shooting arrows towards him and using their swords to attack him. And during this time, a group of Sahaba Ikram, again, for us to understand what is the meaning of selflessness and sacrifice. This is what you call selflessness. This is what you call sacrifice. In the history of mankind, there is no one that has shown this level of selflessness and sacrifice the way the Sahaba Ikram demonstrated in these battles to protect Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you will not find anywhere in the history of mankind this kind of an example of selflessness. And all of a sudden, a group of Sahaba Ikram, they came and surrounded Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam, and they used their bodies as physical shields to take all of the arrows that were now being shot towards Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam. And there were quite a few Sahaba Ikram that surrounded Huzur alayhi salam. Just to mention a few, Hazrat Dajjana radiyallahu ta'ala an, he was using his physical body to take all of those arrows onto himself and prevent them from reaching Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. Hazrat Talha radiyallahu ta'ala an, he was a master archer, and he himself, while he was standing using his body as a physical barrier from the attacks of the kuffar, Hazrat Talha radiyallahu ta'ala used his bare hands to stop the arrows from coming towards Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And it mentioned that he eventually incurred between 35 to 39 injuries on his body. This is how badly he became injured, using his physical body as a shield and using his bare hands to stop the arrows that were flying towards Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. And then there was Hazrat Qatada bin Nu'man radiyallahu ta'ala an. And again, we can't even imagine the level of pain, the level of distraughtness that these Sahaba Ikram had to go through during that time, where they were using their own bodies as physical shields for Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. Hazrat Qatada bin Nu'man radiyallahu ta'ala an, he also shielded himself, shielded Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam from the kuffar using his physical body. And eventually one of the arrows that the kuffar shot went straight through his eye, and his entire eye was hanging out on threads. This is how he became injured. So they shot an arrow, and he used his face to protect the face of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. And when that arrow had shot and it entered straight into his eye, and his entire eye came out, then he came to Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, and Huzur al-Islam then placed his eye back onto his socket, and Huzur al-Islam made dua for him and said, "Oh Allah, save the eye of Qatada that was used in saving the face of your Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam." Subhanallah. Look at the dua that Huzur al-Islam made for him. And again, this is the reward of those who don't seek any reward when they sacrifice. And this is what we need to understand. We keep seeking reward. This is why we don't get any reward. We want recognition, we want praise, and we are wasting our time because we don't get any sawab for anything that is done for show. We don't get any sawab for anything that is done when we want people to respect us, we want people to praise us. Then we are wasting our time, we are wasting those deeds because we don't get any good deeds in our nama amal for those things. But when we follow the example of the Sahaba Ikram, and we do things solely for the pleasure of Allah and His Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, then we see the rewards like how they received. I mean, try to imagine the pain that Hazrat Qatada radiyallahu ta'ala must have went through using his face as a shield for the blessed face of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. If we had to just take a pin and just slightly poke it onto our eye, we can imagine how much of pain we would go through. Now try to imagine an arrow with force that strikes and enters into your eye, and your entire eye comes out from his socket and is hanging. Imagine the level of pain that he was going through. But this did not deter them. This did not bother them. The pain did not bother them because they had the blessed face of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam in front of them. And this is all that mattered to them. As long as Huzur alayhi salam was safe, then they were happy. As long as Huzur alayhi salam was not injured, then they were pleased. And because of this, he received this dua that Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam said, "O Allah, save the eye of Qatada that was used in saving the face of your Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam." And eventually it is mentioned that eye for which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam made dua, after his dua, after placing that eye back into its socket, that eye was much more beautiful than his other eye that was normal, and his sight and vision in that eye was greater than the vision that he had in the other eye. Subhanallah. When we go for an operation, when we go for surgery, etc., then we know that because of scars and the surgical procedures, etc., where they operate doesn't look as good as what the other body parts look like because of the all of the procedures that they do and the scars, etc. But this is the shan of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, that just by his blessed hands touching the eye of Rasulullah, the eye of Hazrat Qatada radiyallahu ta'ala an, that eye became more beautiful than his normal eye that was not injured, and his eyesight was even better than the eye that was not injured. Subhanallah. Again, it demonstrates to us the shan of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. It demonstrates to us the level of sacrifice of the Sahaba Ikram and how they were rewarded by Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. Now, these are just some of the examples of the Sahaba Ikram during this battle, the examples of sacrifice and selflessness. But it is not just the Sahaba Ikram that demonstrated these qualities. Even the Sahabiyat, even the female companions of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, even they demonstrated to us that it does not matter whether you are male or female, but our jazba to sacrifice for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam must be the same. Subhanallah. And this, even us, whether we are males or females, we can all learn from the examples of these blessed females, these blessed companions of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, that demonstrated in this battle that even though they were females, but they demonstrated such levels of courage and bravery that they did not care who was in front of them. They did not see that there are heavily armored kuffar in front of them. All they saw was that they had to protect their beloved Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, even if they did not have weapons in their hands, even if they did not have any armor on them. but they were willing to sacrifice themselves for the protection of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam. And this, apart from just for us in general, but specifically, this is also a lesson for women folk. You know, today we have become so engrossed in the dunya that the meaning of sacrifice, the meaning of selflessness does not occur to us. And especially, you know, at that time, those companions, they were willing to sacrifice their lives for Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam. We are not willing to sacrifice our comforts and our worldly pleasures for the sake of the Sharia of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. Remember, the Sharia is Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam is the Sharia. So when we follow the Sharia, this is a demonstration of our love for Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam. When we commit guna, then our claim to love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is an empty claim, because if you truly love him, then we will follow what he had commanded us to do. If we truly love him, then we will perform our salah the way he commanded us to perform our salah. Why? Because Huzur alayhi salam said, salah is the coolness of my eyes. If we love him so much and we want to bring coolness to his eyes, then we will also perform our salah in the manner that he taught us to perform our salah. We will also not make qaza our salah. But today we become so engrossed in the dunya that, you know, these things don't really matter to us. What matters to us is our worldly pleasures and everything that's surrounding us. And we need to change our mindset, and we need to get back to the teachings of the Sahaba Ikram and the Sahabiyat Ikram. Now, just to give you one example of some of the females and what they had contributed towards in this battle of Uhud. It is narrated that Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu ta'ala anha and Sulaim radiyallahu ta'ala anha, the two of them, during the battle of Uhud, they used to fill the leather skins with water, and they used to go around looking for the mujahideen that were injured, and they used to give them water to drink. Now again, try to picture this. This is now a battle taking place where the Muslims have been surrounded by the kuffar. The Muslims are being killed and made shaheed by the kuffar. Muslims are being attacked with spears, with arrows, etc. And you have these women folk that are not worried about themselves. They're not worried about getting injured. They're not worried about getting killed. All they are worried about is serving the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, serving those that have been injured while they tried to protect Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they used to fill the water skins with water and go around looking for the mujahideen that were injured, and they would give them water, not worried about what could happen to them while this battle is taking place. Again, this shows us the level of selflessness and sacrifice. And one particular sahabiyat, her name was Sayyidah Ummara radiyallahu ta'ala an. And there's a lengthy incident with regard to her specifically, but it's a beautiful incident for us to understand the level that she went through in order to protect Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam, being a female and, you know, being someone that was not armed or that was not armored, etc. And it is mentioned that she had entered the battle together with her husband, Hazrat Zayd bin Asim radiyallahu ta'ala an, as well as her two sons, Hazrat Abdullah and Hazrat Ummara radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. So she came with the entire family. They participated in the battle of Uhud. And initially, she was also doing the same thing that Sayyidah Aisha Siddiqa and Hazrat Sulaim radiyallahu anhuma were doing, in that she used to fill the water skins with water and go around giving the mujahideen that were injured water to drink. But at one point, when she saw that the kuffar were coming to physically attack Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, she picked up a dagger and she stood before the kuffar and she tried to protect Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. Subhanallah. Imagine, the kuffar were fully armored. They had weapons with them. They had swords, they had bows and arrows, they had spears. But to protect Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam, while she was going around giving water to the mujahideen, when she sees Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam being attacked, she does not say to herself, what am I going to fight against these people who are fully armored, fully weaponed, etc. No, all she sees is the love for Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam. She does not look at logically. It is impossible for her to win against people of this caliber and you know, fighters that have been trained to fight in battle and in war, and that to males that have been fully clad in armor, etc. All she does is as soon as she sees Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam being attacked, she picks up a dagger from the floor and she goes and she tries to defend Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she stands in front of Huzur al-Islam and she protects Huzur al-Islam, and eventually she got injured on her head and on her neck while doing this. And after some time, the same Ibn Qamiyah that I had mentioned earlier that had attacked Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, when she saw him again coming to attack Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she stepped forward and used her body as a physical shield to protect Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam. Look, her being a female without any armor, etc., this is what you call selflessness. This is what you call sacrifice. That she was willing to give her life, but she was not willing to see for herself Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam being injured and being attacked by the kuffar. And while she was using a physical body to protect Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she got attacked and her shoulder also became injured. And in this time, she picked up a sword and she attacked Ibn Qamiyah. And again, Ibn Qamiyah, because he was wearing two armored shields, her attack did not affect him in any way. And again, you can see, imagine us being in the situation and you have an enemy standing in front of you wearing two shields and you have nothing on you. And you think to yourself, but I have no chance against this person. But this was not the mindset of the Sahaba Ikram. This was not the mindset of the companions. They did not look at logic. They looked at the power of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. They looked at what would happen if they had to sacrifice everything for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, because they knew that this dunya is not for us. This dunya is not for the believer. And this is why they could bear such hardship, they could bear such pain, because they understood what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, the verse that I had recited right at the beginning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, and give glad tidings to those who have patience. You know, today we want to run away from the hardships. We want to run away from pain. We want to run away from difficulty. But we don't realize that this dunya is for hardship. This dunya is for difficulty. This dunya is for pain. We need to be silent and patient when we go through these things. Why? Because the akhirat is for the believer, not this dunya. This dunya was made for us to undergo hardship, to undergo calamities, to undergo the test of our iman. So when we as Muslims try to find solace, try to find pleasures in this dunya, then we are clearly going down the wrong path, because this is not what our purpose in this dunya is. And we will never find everlasting bliss in this dunya, because this dunya isn't for us. The akhirat is for us, where inshallah we will find everlasting bliss. And this was the mindset of the Sahaba Ikram. This is why they did not care how much of pain they had to go through, how much of hardship they had to go through, because they knew that when we go through these things with patience, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, glad tidings to those who have patience. They knew that those glad tidings will come in the akhirat, and inshallah they will be blessed by Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. And just to conclude this incident of Hazrat Umara radiyallahu ta'ala anha, eventually her son Hazrat Abdullah, he also became injured. He became so injured that he was bleeding profusely, and he left the battlefield and he came out. And when he came towards his mother tore a piece of her clothes, and she tied a piece of cloth around the injury. She tied it tight to stop the bleeding. And then she commands her son to go back, and she says, "Oh my son, stand up and go into the jihad again." Subhanallah. Again, you know, when our children become injured or they get hurt, then we don't want to send them to that same place again. We don't want them to go to that same place. Why? We think, no, that person will get injured, my child will get injured. But this was the level of the self-sacrifice of the Sahaba Ikram, that even if they had to sacrifice their own children for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala wasallam, it did not matter to them. Everything revolved around the pleasure of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala wasallam. And after she sent him, and Abdullah himself, he narrates this entire incident, and he says, after she wrapped the cloth and she commanded him to go back, he says that when he went back into the battlefield, that same person that had attacked me, he was coming towards Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam, and Huzur al-Islam turned toward Umara, and he said, "Oh Umara, look, it is the same disbeliever who attacked your son." And when she saw this, then she drew a sword and she struck that disbeliever so hard on his leg that he fell to the ground, and eventually he dragged himself on his behind and he left the battlefield. Subhanallah. Look at the level of bravery and courage of Hazrat Sayyidah Umar radiallahu ta'ala anha, being a female, look at how she fought the kuffar, how she contributed to the protection of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. And when Huzur alayhi salam saw this, I know my time is up, I'm going to conclude this. When Huzur alayhi salam saw this, he smiled at her and he said, "Oh Umara, you should be grateful to Allah ta'ala that He has granted you the strength to participate in jihad." And what does she say? Abdullah narrates, he says, "My mother then said to Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, make dua that we are allowed to be your servants in Jannah." Subhanallah. You know, we make dua that, oh Allah, grant us the companionship of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam in Jannah. And there's nothing wrong with asking this dua. But look at the level of selflessness that the Sahaba Ikram had. Look at the level of sacrifice, that whether in this dunya or the akhirat, all they want to do is serve Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. They are not interested in the pleasures of this dunya or the akhirat. They are only interested in being the ghulam of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam. So she does not ask, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, make dua that I am your companion in Jannah. She says, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, make dua that we are allowed to be your servants in Jannah. And what does Huzur al-Islam make dua? He says, Allahumma ja'alhum rufaqa'i fil Jannah. Huzur al-Islam says, oh Allah, make all of them, meaning Umara and entire family, my companions in Jannah. Subhanallah. She asked to be a servant, but look at the reward that she got. Again, it teaches us, if you sacrifice sincerely for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala wasallam, you get reward beyond measure. And this is the same. She wanted to be a servant of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Jannah, but Huzur al-Islam made dua for and said, oh Allah, grant them my companionship in Jannah. And it is mentioned that after this dua, she would openly say to everyone, I do not fear facing even the biggest calamity in this world after this dua of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of us the tawfiq and the hidayat to understand the concept and the meaning of sacrifice and selflessness from the Sahaba Ikram, from the Battle of Uhud, and try to implement that in our lives. جزاكم الله. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم لسائر المؤمنين والمؤمنات إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen to Maulana's duas. And shukran jazilan to Maulana, to the participants. Inshallah, we'll meet again next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.